Hi folks, Lou here to talk about the fundamental differences between board games and card games. Now I differentiate between what I'm going to call real board games and artificial board games. Real board games depict maneuver or placement and geospatial relationships. That's what the board is for. The artificial ones were invented, I suspect, millennia after board games were invented. So you're using something that looks like a board to keep track of whatever the statuses are that the board depicts. But that could be done in other ways just as practically. So at some point you can add a board to a card game, for example Deluxe Munchkin, yet it is still a card game. The Deluxe Munchkin board just tracks player levels, and that was done by other methods for many years before the deluxe version. So why bother? Well, in this case it was so they could charge more for the game. You can often fit a game into either the board format or a card format. And of course, there are several Euro games where there's both a board and a card version. I even created a prototype card version of Britannia long ago, but I just played it once. And I created a card version of a prototype Dungeon Skirmish board game using cards as the board. And that's got played quite a few times, but it takes too long, and so I've set it aside. So the fundamental difference is this. Board games typically reveal information. Card games typically hide information. Further, board games, the real ones, track geospatial relationships. And those separate the player's assets by those relationships. So it's harder to gang up on a player. In multiplayer, this doesn't really apply in two-player, but in more than two players, it makes a difference. Card games, by nature, do not separate players and assets. So leader bashing, which is a problem with games for more than two players, is typical in a card game. Now that may be offset by all the hidden information so that you don't know who's ahead. How do video games fit in here? Video games can combine the virtues of both, but they rarely do. The natural state for a video game is to hide information. The developer has to tell it what and how to show to the players. And in that sense it's more like cards than like board games. But you can use the equivalent of a board in a video game, as in Civilization and many other military strategy games. So, when you're working on a game idea, you might want to think long about what format to use, board or card or even video. What is most appropriate for the design? What's most appropriate for marketing? Thanks for listening.